Alice and Celine are close friends and neighbors living traditional lives with successful husbands and sons who are the same age. After Celine drives off one morning, Alice, who has been secretly watching from her window, heads straight to Celine's house. She closes all the curtains and retrieves a knife from the drawer. Meanwhile, Celine arrives at school and warmly greets an expectant mother before picking up the kids, Theo and Max. Upon returning home, she immediately notices her drawn curtains and becomes suspicious, so she goes to investigate. To her surprise, Alice has gathered friends and family to throw her a surprise birthday party. Overjoyed, Celine rushes to hug her dear friend. Her husband, Damien, who was in on the plan, greets her with a passionate kiss and lifts their son, Max, with joy. Alice's husband, Simon, also gives her a kiss, and Granny Jean, Simon's mother, greets Celine warmly. After the cake is cut, Alice presents Celine with a pearl necklace from everyone, leaving her deeply touched. Later, Alice approaches Granny Jean, who's busy entertaining the boys, and comments on her habit of taking medication with champagne. Granny Jean is unfazed but asks Alice to keep it a secret from Simon. As the boys, Max and Theo, run outside to play, Alice becomes flustered upon realizing they've taken cookies. Apparently, Theo is allergic. She begins searching the backyard, calling for him in a panic. Celine joins her, alarmed by Alice's reaction, and helps search. They eventually find the boys emerging from a hedge. After confirming Theo hasn't eaten any cookies, Alice scolds him for not responding to her calls. Moments later, she softens and kisses him playfully before the boys dash back to the party. That evening, after the children are asleep, the two couples spend time dancing and enjoying each other's company. The men begin discussing politics, voicing their disapproval of the young president, but Alice and Celine disagree. Drawing on her past experience as a journalist, Alice lists the president's achievements, prompting Damien to compliment her insight. Simon shifts the conversation to the president's pregnant wife and subtly hints at the idea of having another child. This unsettles Alice, but she quickly refocuses on Damien's compliment, suggesting she might call her former boss to restart her career. However, Simon feels it would put too much pressure on Alice. Celine calmly disagrees, but Alice's mood is already soured, and she heads inside. Celine soon follows, and Alice abruptly asks if Celine is truly content with her life. Celine admits she'd love a sister for Max, but says she's genuinely happy with how things are. Seeing that Alice doesn't feel the same, she encourages her to return to work if that's what she wants. However, Alice brushes it off with a laugh. Still insistent, Celine offers to take care of Theo and help around the house so Alice can focus on getting back to work. Well, anything to make her friend happy. Later that night, while in bed, Simon brings up the idea of having another child again, making Alice visibly upset. He asks if Celine has influenced her change of heart, but Alice clarifies that Celine was content giving up nursing, unlike her. When Simon questions why she still wants to work despite his high income, Alice simply says she wants to work again. He suggests she try writing for the school paper if she still has the urge as a reporter, but this only frustrates her more. Can you blame her, though? The next morning, Alice sends Theo off to school. Just before Simon drives off, Celine arrives, informing them Max won't be going because he's sick. Later, while trimming the garden, Alice notices Max standing at the edge of the balcony, trying to reach his birdhouse in the tree. She instantly calls out, warning him to step back, but Max doesn't listen. Panic grips her. She tries to slip through a narrow gap in the hedge, but gets stuck for a moment. Giving up, she runs back around, screaming Celine's name, but Celine doesn't hear her over the vacuum. In a full panic, Alice bursts through the front door and races upstairs. The commotion finally catches Celine's attention, and she follows, confused. Alice reaches the balcony, but it's too late because Max has slipped. Frozen in horror, Celine lets out a gut-wrenching scream before rushing downstairs. Alice also comes downstairs and finds Celine on the ground, cradling Max's bloody head, weeping uncontrollably. The sight shatters Alice. That evening, Simon and Alice go to pay their respects. When Damien opens the door, he silently collapses into Simon's embrace. Alice also embraces Damien, offering her condolences. She asks if they can see Selene, but Damien explains that the family will be arriving soon and they need some time alone. Simon understands and assures him that he and Alice are there if they need anything at all. Later that night, Alice hears Selene screaming and peers through the window, witnessing her friend in a hysterical breakdown while Damien tries to calm her. The loss of a child is every mother's greatest fear. The next morning, Simon and Alice break the news of Max's passing to Theo, who, at only 7, doesn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation. After Simon leaves, Alice notices someone watching from Celine's window. She walks over and knocks, but no one answers, so she heads back home. When she checks on Theo, he's nowhere to be found. Worried, Alice steps outside and gently calls out for him. She finally hears his voice near the hedge and finds him talking to Selene on the other side. Looking sad, Theo asks questions about Max, but Alice gently interrupts, telling him to come inside. Before leaving, Theo gives Selene a hug. Alice calls out to her, explaining that she tried to visit. Quietly, she asks if Selene is avoiding her. Selene doesn't respond. She simply stares at Alice with a look of anger before walking away, leaving Alice devastated. Later that evening, while washing dishes, Alice begins to blame herself for not keeping a closer eye on Max. She wonders if she could have gotten to him sooner, but Simon pulls her into a comforting embrace. In their bedroom, Alice tearfully confesses that she feels responsible, but Simon insists it was a terrible accident, nothing more. Theo interrupts, asking if he can go get his stuffed bunny from Selene's house. Simon tells him it's too late, but they'll retrieve it the next day. When Theo complains that he can't sleep without it, Alice suggests he sleep with them instead. Noticing her tears, Theo asks if she's crying. Alice simply says she's just tired, then snuggles in with both Simon and Theo. The next morning, Max's funeral is held in a somber church service. The atmosphere is heavy with grief over the loss of a child. Damien approaches the altar to speak and breaks down in tears, unable to bear the pain. Selene, dressed in a black veil, looks back at Alice, her eyes filled with grief and unmistakable anger. As people step forward to pay their respects to Max, who lies in an open coffin, Alice, Simon, and Theo also approach. But the moment takes a devastating turn when Theo spots his stuffed bunny beside Max. He immediately shouts and lunges for it, but Alice and Simon manage to hold him back.
Bunny! Bunny's mine! Stop it! Bunny's mine! No! No! Bunny! Bunny!
Theo doesn't stop shouting, disrupting the service. Simon quickly carries him outside while Selene collapses in her seat, overwhelmed with grief. Outside, Simon begins scolding Theo for his behavior, but Alice stops him. Though she admits Theo acted out, she points out that the bunny is his, and she angrily questions why Selene would place it with Max, knowing it belonged to Theo.
Realize what you did? Huh?
Bunny!
He misbehaved, I know, but it's his toy.
Later, Alice watches from her window and sees Selene leaving the house with a few others, her expression solemn and drained. At a school recitation a month later, Selene makes an unexpected appearance, surprising the expectant mother. As Selene reaches out to touch her belly like before, the woman pulls away and quickly makes an excuse to leave. Talk about stigmatization. Trying not to dwell on the moment, Selene spots Theo and smiles gently. She walks toward him but suddenly faints, prompting Alice to rush to her aid. Selene regains consciousness in a quiet classroom, disoriented with Alice at her side. Alice gently questions her presence at the school, knowing how much it unsettles her. Through tears, Selene admits the silence in her home has become unbearable. Being alone with her thoughts hasn't helped. She apologizes for pushing Alice away, saying she needs her friend back. Alice immediately understands. Just then, the children's recitations begin. Selene urges Alice to go, not wanting her to miss Theo's moment. Later, Alice and her family visit Selene and Damien's home. Selene greets them warmly and goes to call Damien. When Theo tries to grab some food laid out, Alice quickly stops him. Suddenly, Damien's voice echoes from upstairs, yelling at Selene. Simon suggests the visit may have come too soon, but Alice insists they need to support them. Selene returns downstairs, saying Damien won't be joining them. She kneels beside Theo and hands him the stuffed bunny, apologizing for taking it without asking. She explains she just didn't want Max to feel alone, and Theo hugs her tightly.
I didn't want Max to be alone. I'm so sorry.
Selene then sets down a basket of toys and encourages him to play. They all begin to make small talk, but the conversation soon grows awkward. Sensing the tension, Simon suggests they head out and visit again another time when Damien is feeling better, but Selene insists they stay. Alice joins her in the kitchen, commending her for putting together the dinner. A few minutes later, Theo enters, asking for a matchbox for Simon, and Alice decides to take it to him herself. Out of childlike innocence and curiosity, Theo asks Selene if she's going to have another baby. Selene gently tells him she can't. Unrelenting, he asks why, and she tries to explain that it's simply not possible for her. Theo continues his questions, but Alice thankfully returns, rescuing Selene from the difficult moment. Later, Alice finds herself drawn to Max's room. She steps inside and notices everything has remained untouched since the day of his accident. Suddenly, Damien appears in the doorway, startling her. She quickly apologizes for snooping and tries to leave, but Damien stops her. He leans in and quietly asks if she misses Max. Alice affirms, but Damien then turns away and enters the room, locking the door behind him. That night, Alice and Selene sit outside, silently sharing a cigarette in the cool breeze. Suddenly, a loud crash from upstairs startles Alice. Selene stares blankly ahead and quietly confesses that Damien blames her for Max. He's never said it aloud, but she sees it in the way he looks at her. Alice tries to reassure her, saying it was a terrible accident, but Selene struggles to accept that. Alice opens up about her own past, how she survived a car crash that took her parents when she was a child. She carried the guilt into adulthood and couldn't even hold Theo when he was born. She had to be admitted to a hospital for months before she finally learned how to separate grief from guilt. But Selene insists it's different. To her, she wasn't watching Max, so she failed him. Alice wraps an arm around her, quietly comforting her friend. The next day, Alice returns with Theo from school, and Selene walks up to them. She asks if Theo can come with her for a surprise, explaining that Damien is away at a conference.
Can you come over for a little bit? I have a surprise. Means at a conference.
Please?
Alice hesitates, using Theo's homework as an excuse, but eventually agrees. Later, while watering flowers in her yard, Alice glances up and sees Theo standing on the balcony. Panic immediately grips her.
Theo! Theo! Get off the balcony!
She manages to push through the narrow hedge this time and yells up at him to get inside. Selene steps out at that moment, and Alice, trembling with fear, turns on her, angrily shouting for leaving her son unattended on the balcony. Selene tries to explain that she was right there with him and they were only playing with Max's toys, but she notices the space Alice managed to pass through in the hedge. She apologizes for scaring her and heads downstairs with Theo. Later that evening, Alice reports the incident to Simon, insisting that Selene isn't well. She believes Selene set up the exact situation with Max just to test her. Simon questions why Selene would do that, and Alice admits she passed through the hedge. Alice feels that Selene thinks she should have saved her son too, but Simon gently asks if that belief is really coming from Selene, or from herself. He warns it could be dangerous if she keeps thinking this way. The next morning, Alice sits at the dining table, lost in thought, when Theo walks in and asks for breakfast, snapping her out of it. She quickly starts preparing something and asks how he wants to spend his birthday party. Simon comes down too, and Theo says he wants to invite Selene. Feeling conflicted, Alice asks if he'd like to invite other friends, but Theo simply adds Granny Jean to the list. On the day of the party, Selene feels a pang of sadness as she hears and sees the children playing. After the cake cutting, Selene tries to help by arranging plates, but Alice stops her, encouraging her to enjoy the party instead. Afterward, Selene brings juice to Granny Jean and sits with her. Unfortunately, Granny Jean tells her that her presence isn't the right way to heal. Though Selene insists that being around the children helps, Granny Jean feels it's not good for her own family. Hurt, Selene wonders aloud if she isn't also part of the family. But Granny Jean continues, saying it's unfair to have her there on Theo's special day. Having heard enough, Selene politely excuses herself. In the kitchen, she senses Alice giving her an attitude and asks if she's done anything wrong.
Thank you. I don't understand. Did I do something wrong? Or...
Just then, Simon enters and tells Alice he's taking the kids to the park. He gives her a kiss and leaves. Now alone with Selene, Alice finally asks if she put Theo on the balcony to test her. The question breaks Selene. She wonders if Alice truly believes she's capable of something like that. She tries to leave, but Alice stops her. Selene admits it helps her to spend time with Theo. She reveals Theo is also lonely without Max, and it helps him too. Now tearing up, she reflects on Alice's question, because she knows she'd never do something like that. Alice immediately apologizes. She admits she feels terrible for saving Theo, but not Max, and she pulls Selene into an embrace.
Did you put Theo on that balcony? He's lonely, Alice. He's like a ghost without Max. Can't you see that?
Later, while doing the dishes, Selene notices Granny Jean walking stiffly in the garden with a teacup. She rushes outside, but by the time she gets there, Granny Jean is already unconscious on the ground. Alice starts shouting for help. Selene runs in, but it's too late. Granny Jean has already passed.
Someone help!
Granny Jean's body is soon taken to the morgue, and the doctor asks Simon to sign some paperwork. Too stricken with grief, he leaves the responsibility to Alice. In the office, Alice grows suspicious about the heart attack because Granny Jean had always taken her pills. Noticing the doctor's teacup and recalling Granny Jean's, she requests an autopsy under Simon's name. When Alice returns home, she sees Theo fixing Max's birdhouse with Selene, and her mood instantly darkens. She angrily packs up the birdhouse, prompting Selene to quietly explain that Theo had pleaded with her to help. Alice ignores her and instead tells Theo to only think of the happy times he shared with Granny Jean. Selene gently adds that Granny Jean is now in a better place with Max, and that they have each other. Theo smiles a little at this.
It's gone. Max is there too. I'm surprised if she wasn't showing him if you knew.
Before leaving, Selene offers her condolences, saying Granny Jean was like family to her, and pulls Alice into a comforting hug. But Alice doesn't hug her back. She just thanks her. It seems she's starting to harbor doubts. The next day, Alice begins searching the hedges frantically and eventually finds the pill box. Just then, she spots Selene waving at her and quickly hides the pill before waving back. Back inside, she locks it away in a drawer. That night, Alice is startled awake. She rushes to check on Theo, but finds his room empty. In a panic, she runs back to Simon, only to switch on the light and see Theo beside him, leaving her speechless. The following day, Alice visits the doctor, who reveals that there were no traces of medication in Granny Jean's blood. That means she hadn't been taking her pills. Alice is confused because she had seen Granny Jean taking them regularly, but the doctor insists the tests were conclusive. Back home, Alice frantically searches the drawer for the hidden pill, but it's gone. Later, Alice, Simon, and Theo visit Selene and Damien. Selene serves some snacks, and when Theo reaches for one, Alice quickly stops him. Selene tells him it contains peanut butter, but she's made carrots for him. Theo doesn't want the carrots, so Selene suggests he get something else from the kitchen. Alice stops him again, saying dinner will be served soon, but Theo complains to Simon that he's hungry. Left with no choice, Simon gives him permission. As Theo places his hand on Damien to stand, Damien suddenly jerks but quickly covers it up, saying he didn't want the cigarette butt to burn Theo.
Look in the kitchen. I'm sure you'll find something on the drain board.
No. No, you stay here.
To diffuse the tension, Damien asks Simon how he's holding up, while Selene quietly tells Alice she didn't mean to contradict her about Theo. Simon then raises a toast, thanking Damien and Selene for being there despite their own loss. Just then, Theo stumbles out choking, sending everyone into a panic. Simon rushes to carry him, while Alice angrily flings the pack of cookies Theo had been holding and bolts after them.
Theo, what is it?
At the hospital, Alice frantically explains Theo's peanut allergy as he's taken for emergency treatment.
He can't breathe. I think he's...
20 minutes. His name's Theodore.
Theodore?
Later, Selene and Damien arrive to check on Theo, but Alice goes ballistic the moment she sees Selene. She lunges at her, screaming that she tried to end Theo, and demands that she leave. Simon restrains her and drags her into a nearby room, apologizing to a shaken Damien and tearful Selene, urging them to leave.
What the hell are you doing here? You want to kill my son?
I'm so sorry. Just please go.
Inside, Alice breaks down, insisting to Simon that Selene is the mastermind behind everything. Simon doesn't believe her, but Alice claims Selene manipulates everyone and even accuses her of causing Granny Jean's passing. She reveals the autopsy found no trace of medication in Jean's blood and insists Selene swap the pills with a placebo. Damien can't believe Alice ordered an autopsy on his mother, but Alice insists she knew something was wrong. She explains she hid Jean's pill box to test the pills, but Selene has stolen it before she could prove anything. She believes Selene wants them to suffer for Max. Having heard enough, Simon drags her out of the hospital and into the car. There, he shows her the pill box Selene supposedly stole. He found it in the garden where Jean must have dropped it. But Alice insists she found it herself. Simon, visibly shaken, tells her she's losing her grip on reality. He urges her to focus on Theo, who's in intensive care, and warns her that they're not going down this path again. It nearly destroyed them once before, and he won't let it destroy Theo.
Is this what she stole? Garden, exactly where my mother dropped it.
I found it.
Back in the hospital, Alice and Simon anxiously wait until the doctor returns with good news. Theo's allergic reaction was successfully treated. At home, Alice suggests they move away, but Simon shuts it down. He tells her she needs help and says he should have her committed again. Later, while rearranging Theo's room, Alice spots Selene's car pulling out of her driveway. Seizing the moment, she sneaks into Selene's house and heads to the basement, trying to open the first aid cabinet. Just then, Selene unexpectedly returns to retrieve something. Alice quickly turns off the light to avoid detection. Selene, hearing a sound, notices the basement door slightly ajar. She goes down to check and sees the rope for the light swinging. Meanwhile, Alice hides in the shadows. After a few tense moments, Selene eventually leaves. Thinking the coast is clear, Alice steps out of hiding and quietly grabs the key to leave, only for Selene to catch her. Selene demands to know what she's doing in her house, and Alice fumbles for an explanation, but Selene doesn't buy it. Alice accuses her outright of swapping Granny Jean's pills, stealing the evidence, and ultimately causing her passing. Selene stares in disbelief and hurt. With tears in her eyes, she asks how Alice could accuse her of being a monster after she's already lost her only child. She snatches the key back and yells at Alice to get out.
You're being some kind of monster. I'm the monster. Get the hell out of my house!
Later, Alice drives Theo home and tries to cheer him up by suggesting a vacation, but Theo doesn't respond. When they get to the front door, he finds a wrapped gift and lights up with joy when he sees it's from Selene. However, Alice quickly grabs the gift and storms over to Selene's.
Present! Hey! Wait! Mom, no! What are you doing?
Leave my family alone!
Hurling it at the door and shouting at the top of her voice for her to stay away from her family. Inside her house, Alice begins calling out for Theo but can't find him anywhere. Panic sets in and she races back to Selene's, calling his name. Selene comes downstairs and Alice demands to know where Theo is, but Selene reveals she hasn't seen him. Determined, Alice runs past her and rushes to Max's room, only to see Theo standing at the edge of the balcony. Terrified, Alice begs him to come down, but Theo refuses. He warns her not to come any closer and says he wants to go where Jean and Max are, because no one fights there and it's a better place. Selene carefully approaches, her voice shaking as she apologizes. She admits to leaving the cookies in the kitchen, even though she knew they could hurt him. She promises there won't be any more fighting. Just as she reaches out to pull him down, Theo slips, but Selene grabs him just in time. Alice also lunges forward, terrified.
Like keeping the cookies. That could hurt you. That was my mistake.
Alice clings to Theo, sobbing and telling him how sorry she is. She takes Celine's hand and thanks her for saving him. Later that night, Alice tells Simon everything and admits she needs help. Simon quietly tells her he's found a house they can rent and they can move in 2 weeks. Overwhelmed with emotion, Alice kisses him passionately and thanks him. The next morning, Alice goes to Celine's and apologizes for everything she accused her of. She admits she's now seeing a doctor and taking medication to get better. Selene also admits her own mistakes, that she blamed Alice for Max's death. She apologizes too, acknowledging that they both did the best they could given the circumstances. Alice shares their moving for Theo's sake. Selene agrees, saying they can't keep living like this. They hug, finally finding some peace. Later, Damien returns home. Selene brings him a drink, then follows with another shortly after. She tells him about Alice and her family moving. Damien chuckles, saying she's been clinging to Theo too much, so he can't blame them. He accuses her of forgetting Max too quickly and tells her to leave Alice and Simon alone, insisting she must never bring Theo into their house again. That night, Alice and Simon indulge in a passionate time, and she reveals she wants to have another child. Meanwhile, Selene stands over Damien as he sleeps. She places a bottle of chloroform and a folded handkerchief on the bedside table. With a solemn look, she uses it on him. She then lifts him gently and hugs him before taking a razor to his wrists, leaving it on his palm. The next morning, Alice and Simon are startled by the sound of sirens. They step outside where an officer informs them that Damien has taken his own life. Shocked and devastated, they are at a loss for words. Later, they bring a seemingly broken Selene into their home. Alice leads her upstairs to the spare room to stay. That evening, Simon returns home. After settling Theo into bed, Alice updates Simon on Selene. Simon regrets not realizing what state of mind Damien was in, but Alice tells him not to be too hard on himself. Simon admits a fresh start is what they need. Alice agrees, but notes that Selene can't go back to her house after everything that's happened. Though it's late, she decides to stop by Selene's place to collect some of her things, giving Simon a kiss before leaving. Meanwhile, Selene sits awake in the room, looking distraught and staring into space. Theo opens the door, commenting on her not sleeping, but she only says the same to him. At Selene's, Alice notices Damien's bloodstains on the ground, leaving her devastated. Selene quietly takes Theo to his room, while Simon has already dozed off in the sitting room with the TV on. She then takes out the chloroform, telling Theo it's a magic potion that helps children sleep. Meanwhile, a key falls out from the clothes Alice is packing, and she realizes it's for the first aid cabinet. Curiosity gets the best of her, and she goes to open it, finding all sorts of pills and bottles of chloroform inside. Guess she was actually right about Selene. Realizing what's happening, she rushes out, but it's already too late. Selene has administered the chloroform to Theo. When Alice gets home, she sees Simon and tries to wake him, but he doesn't respond. Turns out his drink has been tampered with, and he's not just sleeping, but has passed on. Tears fill Alice's eyes. She grabs a figurine, arming herself, and heads upstairs. On the landing, Selene suddenly lunges at her from behind, pressing the chloroform to her nose. Alice struggles, refusing to give in, and manages to push Selene down the stairs. Pills scatter across the floor as Alice collapses, the chloroform beginning to take effect. Though she tries to resist, her body weakens. Selene slowly rises and limps toward her. Alice crawls to Theo's room, using her last strength to lift him to the floor. Just then, Selene enters. She joins them on the ground, lays her head on Theo, and administers the chloroform to Alice. Later, she drags an unconscious Alice to the sitting room, placing her head on Simon's thighs. Selene then washes the glass to remove fingerprints, gathers the scattered pills, and uncorks the gas cylinder, making it appear as though the couple died from a leak. With everything staged, she goes upstairs to soothe an unconscious Theo. Alice briefly opens her eyes, but then closes them forever. Sometime later, the case is brought before the judge. He asks Theo if he would like Alice to be his adoptive mother since both his parents and her son have passed. Theo solemnly agrees, and just like that, Selene has a son. Later, she takes Theo to the beach. He appears moody, so she comforts him, explaining that they feel the same pain. She assures him they'll get through it together, and he begins to brighten. Soon, they are playing, carefree, and Selene is filled with joy.